the founder and CEO of FounderTribes, a mobile app that provides founders across the world with access to feedback, networks, and capital so that they can start up and scale up their businesses, all from their mobile phones. We exist to empower entrepreneurs of all races, genders, geographies, religions, sexual orientations, and all of those other considerations that really should not affect an investment decision, because we understand that while opportunity is spread evenly, uh, while talent is spread evenly, opportunity is not. And we are here to change that, which is why I can think of no better time to launch our app than during Black History Month, especially in the presence of such luminaries as we have been able to assemble today, representing companies worth more than $7.2 trillion and having made a collective commitment of more than $35 billion to address racial inequities in entrepreneurship, mostly in the United States, including the fact that Black people only receive about 1% of VC funding in America, despite being 14% of the population. And here in the UK, Black people receive about 0.24% of funding, despite being about 4 to 5% of the population. Or it could be about the fact that up until recently, there were only 7 Black people in the top 100 VC firms in the US with any decision-making authority. So I suspect that the numbers are probably even worse in the UK and Europe, but I'll leave it to Bindi to kind of, ask our panelists about that. And yeah, Bindi, I just mentioned her. We're lucky to have her moderating this panel. She is a force of nature who, in addition to being a great friend, is an innovation advisor and venture partner at Draper Esprit. She's been dubbed by some as the queen of the UK tech startup ecosystem. But before I pass it over to Bindi, I'd like to give you a sneak peek of our FounderTribes app. So with that, I'll ask Petar to kind of now play the video.
It all begins with a founder submitting a pitch that will be evaluated by a community of entrepreneurs and investors relevant to their vertical and stage. Through the app, each founder gets qualified feedback about which areas of their business might need improvement, in the form of how many people swiped right or left, and in the form of ratings on each key element of a business plan based on Sequoia Capital's evaluation system. Each founder is then offered a personalized selection of video tips from world-class founders who explain how they've overcome similar challenges. Our professors are truly world-class and include such names as Stacey Abrams, Steve Blank, Jen Wong, and Anne Wojcicki. If a founder wants more support, she can access our curated database of coaches and mentors and set up one-to-ones, all via the app. Each founder iterates her pitch until the community of entrepreneurs and investors say that she is investment worthy. We'll then introduce her to relevant funders appropriate to her stage and vertical, including venture capital, angels, and alternative finance.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning on the West Coast. Good afternoon in New York. And greetings from London, where the sun is about to set. So our evening is just about to begin. My name is Bindi Correa, and as Gary mentioned before, I've known him for a very long time, and I've watched the genesis of this idea since I first met Gary in Madrid when he launched the Telefonica incubator Wyra back in 2012. And I've seen the idea form and take shape, so I'm really excited to see the launch of the app today, and I'm really excited to see where this can take us. So with that, I wanted to bring on an amazing panel. We've got collectively a group of corporates with us today that are worth more than $7.2 trillion. And we've got many of the folks in this group who are talking about contributing $35 billion towards this community and this ecosystem. So today I'm really going to go to each of them, get a better understanding of what their companies are doing, And hopefully everyone out there will get much better insight about what is available for you right now. And again, thank you for the tribe, the founder tribes. So with that, can I bring the speakers to stage? Because what I'd like to do is sort of introduce everybody while they can. Okay, so why don't we start with Rachel from Google? Do you want to give a quick 5-minute, a quick 30-second intro to yourself and who you are? And then we'll get much more deeply into what it is you're doing with Google and all the other companies. But just let's hear about you, because I think, if I may, I think each of you are going to be an inspiration to the folks in the audience as well, and the people that we know will be using the FounderTribes app. So I want to hear a little bit about each of you as well. So Rachel, let's start with you.
30 seconds is much better than 5 minutes, Mindy. So thanks for that. So, hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I head our VC and startup partnerships at Google across the EMEA region. Specifically about me, so I am an American Jamaican with also citizenship in Canada and the UK. I've spent 10 years now, 10 plus years now, wow, time flies, in the UK. So inspired by this work for obvious reasons. I mean, I am a minority myself, but I also, am one of the few brown faces in the ecosystem that, is out there. And I see, by just that fact, I see a lot of other minorities, Black people specifically, that have great ideas and minimal opportunity. And one of the things that, many of them struggle with is funding. And we heard the stats, they're abysmal. So, I'm motivated and inspired to drive change for every one of those founders that I end up meeting that has the idea and can't get the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. And with that, I'll move to Amali, who is working at my former company when I was there many, many years ago. I think I departed back in 2012. But Amali, up to stage, and I'd love you to tell people who you are, because you've done some really remarkable things here in the UK to advance equality and diversity.
Thank you so much, Bindi. And yes, my name is Amala Elwis. I'm the Managing Director of Microsoft for Startups based out of the UK. And as Bindi mentioned, not only sort of as far as sort of my Microsoft activities, do I have a real personal sort of interest and critical importance as far as what we do around DEI, how we support, the best people to be successful, whether that's the businesses, the individuals, the founders. But I'm also the former chief exec of an organization called Code First Girls, which was focused on supporting women into the tech industry. So really, again, thinking about how we make sure that the brightest and the best have equal access, who have equal opportunities. And to, I think, Gary's point earlier, we get the best out of these individuals and enable them to be part of our tech ecosystem in a better way. Great.
Thank you for that, Amali. And I think I probably met you 2011, 2012. So I think we go back a long time. So it's good to see that you've stepped into this amazing role. Next up, we have Heather from Goldman Sachs. And Heather, tell us a bit about yourself. And you're calling in from New York. So this is a truly international panel.
I am in the middle of a snowstorm. Great to be here with everybody. Thank you guys so much for having me. I've been at Goldman Sachs for almost 15 years now, and actually have spent a lot of my time doing work that relates to our topic today. So probably most relevant, I'm a senior advisor for our Launch with GS effort, which is a $500 million commitment that we made to invest in diverse entrepreneurs and investment managers. And I agree. I mean, the stats are abysmal kind of across a variety of different groups in kind of the diversity perspective, but also spent a lot of time with our diversity and inclusion council and networks, serving as an MD advisor and in leadership roles with our women's network and our firm-wide Hispanic Latinx network as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Heather. And I've been reading about the snowstorm in New York. We had a little mini one in London last weekend, and it pretty much melted when we hit the ground, but there were a lot of very creative snow people littered around the park, which is fantastic. So with that, Rashmi, I'd like to pass on to you. And again, you're in New York and you're representing Citi.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. My name is Rashmi Kanzi. I work on the Citi Impact Fund, which was launched last year. It's now a $200 million venture capital program investing in double bottom line startups. And my background, I mean, I'm American, but my parents are immigrants. always kind of knew I wanted to do something to address the, very drastic inequality around the world. Started out in investment banking, worked for a couple of tech startups, ended up working in international development, and then now I'm back at a bank. I've been at Citi for about 8 years, started in their community development arm, which is focused on helping low and moderate income communities in the United States. And last year we launched the City Impact Fund, which is investing in 4 different sectors. And also, as of September, when I was last on this panel, we've announced a $50 million commitment to funding Black entrepreneurs specifically.
Great. Thanks for that, Rashmi. We'll get into that much more specifically throughout the discussion. Then we have Alex. Alex, I believe you're based on the West Coast, but I think you're calling us from New York today and from the snowstorm. And Alex with Facebook. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am. I'm also experiencing the snowstorm here in New York. My name is Alex A. May. I'm the Director of Network Investments for Emerging Markets at Facebook. What that means practically is we finance terrestrial fiber and other connectivity efforts across emerging markets in Africa, APAC, and Latin America, really to support Facebook's mission to bring more people online to a faster internet and ultimately to empower communities. Before Facebook, I've been at Facebook for about 2 years now. Before Facebook, I spent most of my career in emerging markets, private equity. I'm originally from Haiti, and I started my finance career at Goldman in London, and then moved to a private equity firm focused on Africa. And so for me, as Gary mentioned at the beginning, I come to this work knowing that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not, and really wanting to participate in empowering communities and bringing more opportunities to those communities to ensure that everyone really has an opportunity to be an entrepreneur and to develop businesses. It shouldn't be limited to just those who are in Silicon Valley, and so bring to that commitment.
Excellent. And last but definitely not least, Omar from Bank of America. And Omar, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Miami, Florida.
Yeah, so no snow there. And I'd really quite freaked out if there was snow in Miami.
Yeah, I don't want to rub it in. I actually just moved out of New York a month ago.
No, you're lucky you missed it in the sun. Sunshine State. So tell us a bit about yourself and what's motivating you to be here with us today.
Sure. Thanks for the time, everybody. I'm actually humbled to be on this panel. I'm the only one that I would say is not an expert in this work. This is actually not my day job, but a commitment that I feel very passionate about. I'm a managing director on the investment banking team at B of A, covering financial sponsors. So primarily the private equity community. So folks like Avista Equity or Cinven, that you may know, RDN, names like that. However, when our CEO came out and delineated $1 billion towards working and ongoing efforts that we're doing in the community to help inequality and racial justice, myself as well as a number of other people who are kind of mainline business folks stepped out and said we want to be a part of this, and have dedicated a decent bit of time to the effort. And I think the key with us was we didn't necessarily want to wait to get a whole team stood up. We have a big ESG franchise that does a lot of work globally on ESG issues, but as it relates to the specific investment program that we'll talk about going forward, I think before waiting for standing up a team, and we didn't have the benefit of a City Ventures prior to making this commitment, and so we kind of just all jumped in and tried to make hay of what we had. By way of background, I'm Sudanese by nationality. I was born and raised in the States, but to immigrant parents. Grew up in Washington D.C. and went to school in New Jersey at Princeton. And then I'd say in terms of my commitment to this effort and why I care, I was president of the Black Student Union at Princeton. I was president of the Black Business Students Association at Columbia Business School. But to me, it's always been something that's just the responsibility and the passion of giving back has always just been critical to, I think what makes a well-rounded professional. And so it's never been about, necessarily the career path for me. It's always been more about making sure there's a connection between, the capital that we're raising in the capital markets every day and the entrepreneurs who I grew up around who never got access. And so the work you guys are doing here and everybody else on the panel, as well as the organization, Gary, everybody, is just so absolutely critical. And it's a pleasure to be amongst you guys.
Great. Thank you for that amazing introduction, Omar. And I do have to send my apologies from Raggy from Amazon. Unfortunately, work got in the way, but he is equally as passionate about this as the rest of us are. And I feel I kind of need to add my background because I'm Indian Kenyan, born in the UK, raised in Canada, and back in the UK. And I think the one common trait that all of us have, and we've all seen in our own careers, is that we've probably all had to work twice as hard to get half as far. And I know that's something that my father consistently told me when I was growing up in small town Canada, when I was the only non-white person in a very small Western Canadian farm town in the prairies. So I think this is just something so passionate to all of us. And, you know, might I say, what an awesome group of individuals that Gary has managed to assemble today. So I'm really looking forward to getting more insights about what each of you are doing within your organizations. So with that, my first question, and I'd like to pass this question on to everybody, if that's all right, and maybe go down the line. What are each of your organizations doing to address racial equality inside the business and outside the business? And I'm aware that, you know, some of you are working in the investment side and you'll have more insight around what you're doing that way, but even just a high level summary of what you guys are doing, I think that would be really helpful for the audience out there to see what is happening. So why don't I start with you, Rachel? Rachel, are you?
Sorry. I mute every time I'm not talking. So we are doing a lot. And I'm not familiar. I don't know everything we're doing, but I'll, you know, talk about some of the high level stuff that I do know. So, you know, back when George Floyd died, we made, you know, massive commitments from the senior level, you know, really driven from the top. You know, Sundar was basically on the phone like, we need to do something, and a lot came out of that. So we've made commitments to increase our leadership representation by underrepresented groups by 30% by 2025. So that's a big commitment. And so the hiring and the way we do hiring is obviously, you know, going to look a little bit different, I assume. We're also looking, I thought this was really interesting, you know, we're looking in different places for those new hires, right? So I think that the world or tech might be coming to the realization that, you know what, Black people don't necessarily want to live in California, right? So where else could we, you know, hire from? What other hubs can we identify? Whether it's Atlanta, London was mentioned, all that, where we look for talent. Internally, we're really focusing on our retention and thinking about what we can do for our own Googlers. So we've got, you know, a Black Leadership Advisory Group, which is the most senior Black people within Google that has a direct line to the CEO, that makes concrete recommendations in all aspects of the experience of Googlers. We have talent liaisons within each product function and functional area to advocate for retention progression of underrepresented Googlers. And then we also have various anti-racism education programs that we've been, you know, a part of, right? So I know my team specifically, I thought this was really interesting. Our president said, you know what, all of you, here's some cash, you know, go buy anti-racism resources, learn, right? And it's particularly important for, you know, the many Googlers that might have no clue about this stuff, right? Versus, you know, them going to their minority colleagues and asking them. Specifically in the startup side, we've made $100 million commitment focused on entrepreneurs as part of a broader $175 million commitment. And from that cash, we have already started to a couple of Black Founders funds, one in the US, one in Brazil. We've announced in Europe that we're currently working on rolling out. We're investing in Black-led VCs, so hopefully fixing a longer-term issue. And then we're working with organizations that help to build the community and make the path easier for entrepreneurs. So nonprofit types of things. So that's what we're doing in a nutshell. I definitely did not get it all. There's stuff around supplier diversity, all this stuff, but that's, you know, what I know. And I specifically know the startup focused areas.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's still showing that I guess the corporates are listening. And yeah, absolutely. And so with that, Amali, I'd love to hear from you and what's happening at Microsoft.
Thanks, Bindi. And I think, some echoes probably of really, hopefully some really good work being done by Microsoft as well. So, Microsoft have been, for example, a member of the $1 Billion Roundtable Club as well. So this is, companies who source at a minimum $1 billion on a first tier basis and provide buy services from minority and women-owned businesses. Talking to sort of how we support, I guess, on the supplier side as well as then on the employee side. On the employee side, we obviously have a lot of initiatives which are supporting our various different individuals in the business to develop through, particularly looking at obviously our Black colleagues, and we have networks who are there to support from that side as well. There has been a deep commitment made as far as diversity in the business as a whole. So actually, every single person in Microsoft has a goal. I have this, every 6 months when I do my sort of performance reviews, I need to be able to defend how I have been working in this company to support people from Black backgrounds, from other ethnic minority backgrounds, support women into this business and support teams who are developing there. We've made commitments as well around sort of spend. So this is both further spend into the community. So whether that's with grants, so we have programs which are offering money to organizations which are obviously supporting Black and African owned businesses, small business specifically. We have programs which are there around education. So an intensive program which actually works across traditionally sort of Black focused education organizations, mostly across the US, but supporting them basically with money to actually support their students come through. And as well as actually some small business loans as well, capital providing loans. So a fund which was set up to actually support partners through their growth as their sort of businesses grow on that side as well. So I think similarly to my other speakers here, I think so much activity going on. A lot of it is coming through the US, and I think that's a reflection of, I guess, a lot of our big companies starting out of the US in the first place. But even if you look at the UK, for example, we have a number of partnerships on the startup side. So, I work very closely with Deborah Ekenla from YSYS, with Color in Tech, with 1,000 Black Founders. And we basically, support their companies to come and grow with us. So our most recent AI for Social Impact program, for example, is it even shocked us. 80% of those who were applying to the program are coming from underrepresented and underserved backgrounds. So, trying to both put money where our mouth is, but also just from a practical and growth perspective, just make sure that, we are enabling people to grow and get the best out of them.
Yeah, excellent. Wow, there's a lot going on there. I'm going to stick with the big techs for now, and then I'll move to the financial services organization. So, Alex, what's happening at Facebook?
Sure. You're going to hear a lot of echoes of what's already been discussed at Google and Citi. Not surprisingly, we too have made a number of commitments back in June. There are a few large ones that we made specifically around product, suppliers, as well as in terms of hiring. From a product perspective, one of the things that we did is we launched a space in the Facebook app called Lift Black Voices, which launched back in October, and it's been doing quite well. And it's an area where a lot of different Black-owned creators, content creators, small businesses, et cetera, can really highlight their activities. We also, back in October, launched a Buy Black initiative. And the main goal of that was really to celebrate and support Black-owned businesses and encourage shoppers to buy Black during the holiday season. That was quite successful. So as part of the season of support, we really harnessed that retail day to celebrate Black-owned businesses and communities. And we did that in that initiative. We launched that initiative in collaboration with the U.S. Black Chambers. And I should say, like Omar, this is not my day job. All of this work has been done by a large group of what we call cross-functional partners within the team, whether in our D&I space, our supplier space, et cetera. So I'm really highlighting work that other of my colleagues have been doing and really proud of that work. In addition, we committed to reach 1 million members of the Black community and 1 million members of the Latinx and Hispanic communities in the U.S. with free digital skills trainings through our Elevate program. So I'm focusing on the product stuff because I think one of the things that's important is for the businesses to take this as part of their core activities, right? It's great to do grants. It's great to do to support nonprofits, which we've done as well. But we really want to integrate Black voices and these initiatives for underrepresented founders, et cetera, into the main business of whatever it is we're doing, because that's how it becomes sustainable, right? And I think that's oftentimes the challenge is you get these minor uplift moments, but then you fade back into the core business, the core activities of the business. And the more we can integrate it into the core activities of the tech business, the more sustainable these things ultimately are, and the more accountable the businesses will be to ensure these results are achieved. In addition to the product work, we also launched in June, we announced our commitment to increase our annual spend to at least $1 billion with diverse suppliers by the end of 2021. And this included a commitment specifically to spend a minimum of $100 million with Black-owned companies. And that initiative in 2020, we expanded that from being just US to being global. And we can talk a little bit more about that later, but really trying to understand how we can expand these initiatives beyond just the US. And then in terms of hiring, like some of the others have mentioned, we also have a plan in place. We call it the 30 and 5 plan. So we've already committed to 50% of Facebook's workforce to be from underrepresented communities by the end of 2023. But we're actually working to really double the number of Black and Latinx employees in that same time frame. And so over the next 5 years, that's the 5, we're committed to have 30% more people of color, including 30% more Black people in leadership positions. So our 30 and 5 plan. And so there are a number of initiatives and work that's taking place internally, led by our recruiting, our D&I, as well as our HR departments to ensure there's accountability and there's a plan in place to actually achieve this 30 and 5 plan. So really proud of these initiatives from my colleagues, but there's still a lot more work to be done, for sure.
Yeah, and it's amazing because I will say that we had the 3 ladies that have just spoken. The 3 of them were on a panel with me last September in London Tech Week, and it's incredible to see the progress that's been made since September. So, well done on the companies moving and continuing to move even in 3-4 months. And now I'm going to switch to the financial services sector. And why don't we start with you, Rashmi, and Citi, because again, you were on the panel in September, so it'll be interesting to see, what you've launched, because you announced a bit of a launch, 3-4 months ago. So tell us a bit about that and what it is Citi is doing.
Yeah, so I'll echo what's been already said. We're a large company. We have a bunch of initiatives already in place, whether it's employee resource groups, commitment to hiring and advancing more diverse talent. Citi, I think, was the first major financial institution to disclose our pay gaps, and that is an effort that's continued. And internally, I think all of that continues from the top level down. It's been from the C-suite down, and within the different businesses, I think there are a number of internal dialogues thinking about talent, supplier diversity. How do we increase all of that? Externally, we announced a commitment called Action for Racial Equity in September, committing over $1 billion, and also trying to really, think about how we do business every day to be more inclusive. And so part of that is expanding banking and access to credit to communities of color through existing products and thinking about new potential products. Part of that is investing in entrepreneurship, which I can talk about in more detail. Also promoting Black homeownership and building more affordable and workforce housing. In the US, we are the largest affordable housing lender and have been for several years. And then, Citi has publicly committed to becoming an anti-racist institution. And in terms of external impacts, that's thinking about the projects we finance and their impact on communities of color, as well as thinking about how we use and design technology to be more inclusive and fair. With respect to entrepreneurship, like I said, we got a $50 million to invest specifically in Black founders. And last year was our pilot year for the Citi Impact Fund. We made 11 investments. The majority of those were in women and or founders of color, and 3 of the founders were Black founders. So I will say, in the VC industry, there has been this pipeline myth of we can't find qualified entrepreneurs to invest in, and we have not found that to be the case. I think people just need to be a little more thoughtful about where we're looking for entrepreneurs and how we find them and how we evaluate them. But there's a ton of qualified talent out there with great business ideas.
Yeah, I think when people say there's no pipeline, I think we all firmly agree that that pipeline is there. We just have to look for it. But we'll get on that in a bit. I just want to get through the rest of the organizations. So Heather, Goldman's, I think Goldman's announced, what was it, at Davos last year, that you're not going to work with organizations at IPO unless they do have some form of diversity at the highest level. So, yeah. And I know you've been doing a lot of amazing stuff since that announcement. So if you could take us a bit through what Goldman's is doing, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely, Bindi. And I would completely echo what Alex was saying before. I think, I would group what we're doing in kind of three buckets, right? I'll start with what you just referenced, which is kind of going back to what Alex was saying, really looking at your core franchises and figuring out a way that you can move the ball forward in a sustainable and repeatable way, right? And there's obviously the internal focus on your organization as well as external, more philanthropic efforts. And we do all three. But if I just stay in the middle category of looking at our core franchises and where can we make like a profound difference. You're right. David Solomon, our CEO, this has been a top priority for him since he became the leader of the firm. And so he did announce that we won't take a company public unless they have at least one diverse board member. That then kicked off, frankly, for our own private equity team, frankly, making sure that we have at least one diverse board member on every one of our own boards, right? The boards that we control in our buyout business. And frankly, we're looking to expand that even in places where we don't have majority control. We frankly, in our large asset management business on the public side, right? When we look at as a shareholder of other organizations, when we see non-diverse boards, we'll actually vote. We have stewardship activities where we will vote against the nominating committee if there aren't diverse boards, because ultimately, until you have diversity kind of at all these organizations at the top level, you're not going to have sustainable change trickling down. And so, yeah, as I mentioned before, right, we announced going back almost 3 years ago at this point, a $500 million commitment focused on gender diverse as well as Black and Hispanic Latinx entrepreneurs and investment managers. And part of that is frankly trying to feed into the same pipeline, right? It's great. And we are actively in the market trying to get capital and training and network ecosystem building to diverse entrepreneurs. But equally important, we're trying to get money to diverse investment managers, because even if that's not their focus, you see not only do they outperform, but they also tend to back more diverse entrepreneurs, right? So we're just trying to find multiple ways to expand the network effect, if you will. Internally, I would say a lot of similar things. We're focused on hiring, we're focused on retention and advancement and inclusive culture. And we've actually set explicit goals at kind of several levels, probably not surprisingly. Had our most diverse intern class last year, had our most diverse MD class 2 years ago, and I was proud to be part of the most diverse partner class this year. So, again, if you have tangible goals, I should have mentioned, I didn't give my background, but I come from a family of immigrants as well. My family came from Cuba. So, again, if you don't have tangible goals, it's really hard to match your progress. And then, of course, looking at the communities that we serve and knowing that our strength, frankly, comes from being a valuable member of those communities. We, for a long time, had an urban investment group that invests in underserved communities that don't typically get access to as much capital. We're, leveraging our human talent, a little bit more difficult today, and in volunteership programs, our Community Teamworks project, and then also announced funds towards racial equity this year. So lots of great work, but also humble to hear everything that everyone else is doing.
Great. Thank you for that. Wow. And then last but not least, we've got Bank of America. And I know, Omar, you have been doing a lot of stuff as well. So I'd just love for you to give us a high-level overview of what's happening within your organization.
Yep, I will, in conscious of time here, I will be...
We've got 30 minutes. It's all good.
Okay. I echo a lot of what was kind of outlined before by particularly the financial institutions. I think we kind of have a similar playbook, both around internal and external outreach and how we're involved in the community, especially at Bank of America. I would say that, we are very heavily dependent on our local markets as an institution. It's the majority of our business. And so we really relied on that local market, on our local market presence, to reach out into the community and make sure that they were leveraging their relationships to figure out how we can be most impactful on a local basis. So that's always a part of our strategy. So I don't want to undermine that, and that will continue to be a part of our strategy. But I'll focus a little bit more on the capital that we've outlined for founders, because I think it's relevant to everybody on the line here. So as I said, there was a $1 billion initiative, as we call it. Amongst that that capital that was outlined, there was a $200 million bucket that was focused on investing in minority entrepreneurs. That was the only parameters that was set. We, as where we sit in the business, decided that the best thing to do is to go through the path of folks who are already developing expertise and history in the space. And so we quickly pivoted from where are we going to put dollars, who are we going to invest in, to which fund managers are best equipped to source, to get deals done. And then this is the key point for us that we're focused on. What additional wraparound services, what context, what other additional factors do they bring to bear to help founders be successful? And so, the model here, I think, as an example, there's a fund that I have in mind. The entrepreneur who started the fund, previously ran a business that was focused on Black women's hair care and skincare. He started a fund that's funding young entrepreneurs, picking up the phone, calling Walmart and Target and saying, move my products over a little bit. I've got another up-and-coming brand. It's run by a Black woman. It's focused on the Black community. And those additional, what we call capital plus type of initiatives is really what attracts us to some of these funds. And to be completely frank with you, given how broad we approach everything and how big we are as an institution, we're not as nimble to be able to do that kind of targeting for founders. And so we found across the market, and we tried to take a portfolio approach to this. We announced last week that we had identified our first 40 funds and allocated our first 150 million of capital. So obviously this has happened very fast. And they're just, I can't stress enough that universe of 40 fund managers and their teams are just an incredibly impressive, insightful group of fund managers. And many of them have been doing this work either formally or informally for a long time and are thinking creatively about sourcing and frankly thinking differently about sourcing than kind of the traditional path. So our idea was, if you can give Harlem Capital additional funds to go from a $40 million fund to a $125 million fund, what is the cascading effect on entrepreneurship, on access, capital formation, on the culture of investing, on the wealth creation of, in the fund manager community itself? And then what does that mean for trickling down to valuations and what we can actually do for founders? So again, rather than us going through and assuming that we had the best insight or pathway, we figured that we would empower a community of diverse fund managers. There's a reason that they're diverse, because this is also about wealth creation, right? And this is also about rewarding folks who are able to do this work correctly and will do this work efficiently. And, the surprise, I wouldn't say surprise, the pleasant, reaction internally, I think, when we looked at our 40 funds that we're initially investing in, it was actually, pretty impressive in that the return profile, if you were just to look at their performance over the last 3 to 5 years, is, not only outperforming, the broader market, but significantly outperforming the broader market. And so, the conversation has pivoted from, all right, we're going to donate $1 billion to help because this matters and we care, to, wow, this is a very viable market that we've completely been overlooking and it's right under our radar. Why did we miss it? And then what do we have to do different strategically in the businesses to not miss this again? I think that's the kind of energy that we're seeing internally. So in our commercial bank, alongside our effort with the equity funds, our commercial banking partners are thinking about, well, how do we do something on the lending side that's similar? Why weren't we sourcing correctly? What can we do to increase our funds that are devoted and dedicated to diverse entrepreneurs within the construct of our everyday business? And so I would tell you that, we stand at, our number that we were, allocated was 200 million towards this effort now. That number is quickly turned into 250 without anybody even, batting an eye, and folks are talking about 300, and now folks are talking about permanent vehicles. And it's really, 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 heartening to me and heartwarming to me as somebody who's always believed in this, right? That there's a ton of talent in the community that was being completely overlooked. And, you know, the folks on the phone here, as well as myself, we were the lucky ones who, by way of either ingenuity or by way of network or by way of luck or what have you, were able to get this opportunity. But there's just a gold mine out there that, you know, we have a responsibility to go out there and find. And so if I'm a founder and I sit in your shoes today, I would, you know, be very aggressive about every pathway and avenue you can access to capital, because everybody has this issue. They're underallocated towards a community that's actually outperforming, right? And so whether it's finding the minority VCs, you know, it's not difficult to do so. We can all be helpful to let you get there, or help you to get there. But also all these institutions, whether it's, you know, PayPal, it's done a bunch of work, and, you know, others in the community. I don't want to necessarily single folks out, but approach your contacts, leverage relationships. People come to me and I introduce them to another counterpart in the firm, who introduces them to another counterpart in the firm, and they're huge institutions. But, you know, sometimes it takes 2 calls, sometimes it takes 5 calls, sometimes it takes 25 calls. But the broader message is there that we all know we need to allocate more capital towards this community, and that it's a mutually beneficial outcome that we're all moving towards.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that absolutely amazing summary. And I think what I would observe with each of you, and I sort of scribbled this in my notes, is that you all have not a similar approach, but what I mean is I'm looking at the categories that you're approaching at it, and you're approaching at it at all angles. So you're looking at it through your product and your platform. So whether it's a Facebook platform or a big tech platform, like Microsoft or Google, or whether it's your financial services platform, you're using your products to get to the market. I'm seeing it through procurement. So you've all announced initiatives in procurement and making sure that it's much more equitable. People is what I've put here. So whether it's hiring, advancement, retention, in your career goals, I like that. Amali, you said that was in sort of your 6-month career plan. ROI, right? And the capability of actually making a return on this underserved segment. And that to me is really powerful, because ultimately, as publicly listed institutions, return matters to our shareholders. And then finally, investment. And really that's what we talked a lot about today, where we invest directly in entrepreneurs, whether you've set up funds or as an LP. So you're setting up and investing in funds that will help you get that money distributed to a wider population, but funds that are really focused on the wider. So I mean, guys, that is just simply awesome to hear what each of you are doing. And I know, like, a lot of these initiatives were recently put in place, you know, within the last year. I know, Heather, you said Goldman's was in the last 3 years. Omar, yours was in the last 2-3 years. But I'd love it if, you know, 1 or 2 of you could share some metrics or success stories with me, just so people can see and understand, just put some more flesh on the stories, to really say what are some really great things you've done for people out there. And then while I'm speaking as well, I just wanted to remind the audience to send questions to the platform, and people will feed them through to me, because we will leave some time for questions at the end. So I don't know if anyone wants to raise their hand first and tell me some metrics and some success stories that you'd be happy to share with the listeners out there. Maybe I'll, Heather, maybe you have some stories?
I'm happy to jump in. Before I do, I just wanted to underscore one thing that Omar said for all the founders that are listening, because I think it's really key. I think the way that we blow the door off this, to be perfectly frank, is to get everyone focused on the fact that diversity is a winning investment proposition, right? So, I mean, again, I sit in our funds business. I couldn't agree with you more about needing support, both for entrepreneurs as well as smaller investment managers, to help them size up their portfolios. And that's part of what we obviously do too. But if you look at the studies, like, and again, they're nascent, and skeptics will come up with 500 reasons why they're not the right studies, but diverse teams in the investment context outperform by 33%. Like, it's not a small number. They have lower loss ratios, quicker return of capital. Like, it's a great underserved investment proposition. And even with that, you see that diverse investment managers and diverse entrepreneurs raise a lot less capital, sort of whatever vector of diversity they're representing. And frankly, if they represent 2 or more, i.e. they're, you know, a Latina or a Black woman, even worse, right? So in terms of the access that they have to capital. So just know that you have the winning investment proposition, which is ultimately, I think, getting non-mission aligned capital, people that don't care about the social good, which obviously all of our organizations do, but just making it make sense, which it does, but making more people see that. You have the facts on your side and the numbers on your side, which is always helpful. Sorry, to answer your question, Bindi. Yeah, we have a little bit of a jump start here, only because we've been doing this for a couple of years on the capital side. And so, we have already deployed about $450 million of the $500 million commitment in a combination of funds as well as companies. But the other thing that we're doing, which I think is really important, is we actually held our first Black and Hispanic Latinx founder cohort this summer in virtual world. We were obviously hoping to do it live, but part of what we're trying to do, which I'm sure all these organizations are too, is make the impact of their efforts bigger than the dollars that they're actually putting towards it, right? So using kind of the congregation power and the network of the firm, so that if there is sounds, we should figure out how to work with FounderTribes more directly, just to make sure that if there are founders or investment managers that we aren't able to fund for whatever reason, right, that we are connecting them with other pools of capital. So I think there are lots of good data points on progress being made, but even though all these numbers sound like a big number, it's a drop in the bucket again compared to the pipeline and opportunity set. And I think as much as anything, we're trying to prove the proof statement, right, so that you actually just get people seeing the really clear, powerful investment proposition here, because that, again, as I said, that's the game changer. That's how you get this really, to Alex's point, just to kind of keep going. So
yeah, cool. And I think one thing I'll pull out from there is the pay it forward. I really like that, where even if you find your institution can't help them, you can still introduce them to anyone. All of you, I now feel like, I said at the beginning when we were backstage, I was like, oh, the band is back together, right? There's a lot of stuff we can do with each other in the roles that we're doing. Rashmi, I know you mentioned you made 11 investments, and I know you only launched the fund last September when we spoke back then. Maybe did you want to go into a little bit about a few of those investments? Like, you don't have to say who they are, but just a little bit of a breakdown to really demonstrate what that's about would be really useful.
Sure. So to clarify, we launched the fund in January, but we announced
this month.
The new $50 million for Black founders in September. And, we launched this fund before COVID and before all the unrest of the summer. And so just things we didn't anticipate was learning how to close deals and over Zoom, and not even visiting, a startup on site for due diligence, which was very new to us. But yeah, so we've invested in 11 companies. As I mentioned, the majority of those companies were either founded by women and or people of color, and 3 of the entrepreneurs are Black. And I can give you just, a couple of names actually of the companies, because we're really excited. One thing we did do over the year, we now have a seed stage program. So our minimum check size is $250,000, which helps us reach founders earlier, which is often where the funding gap exists. Yeah. Even though, I think what Omar mentioned about investing in fund managers who can invest even earlier is also important for that funding gap. But 3 companies we invested in with Black founders. One is called MedHall, and they are a booking platform for rides, for non-emergency medical rides for patients. So those who are disabled or with serious medical conditions, their doctors or hospitals can call for safe, trained drivers to bring them to their appointments to make sure they maintain their health and don't end up in an emergency situation. Another is called Perch, and it's helping underbanked and unbanked young adults build and maintain their credit. And then the third one is called Clerky, and it's helping borrowers ease their debt burden and improve their credit. And so we're looking at, different verticals within the fund, but the whole idea is we want to make investments that have a financial return, but that also have a positive impact on society.
Yeah, and I think what I'm going to pull out here is, as Draper Esprit does focus on, bigger ticket investments. And what I like is that you'll go as low as 250K. So that's really making it accessible, and you're meeting the founder at the beginning of their journey as opposed to midway, where it is a lot harder to get to growth stage. So that's really great. And I know, Omar, I'm going to go to the big tech group as well in a sec, but Omar, you did mention you've invested in 40 funds already. So very quickly, because we've only got 10 minutes left. It's gone very quickly.
Yeah. I'll just really quickly mention one that I just think underscores the point right here. Is like, there's a fund that we'll be investing behind, run by a woman by the name of Maria Velasaris, who's a Black woman who's experienced in the healthcare space. She's focused on diverse entrepreneurs with a lean towards businesses that have, some value in bridging the healthcare divide and access to healthcare. And one of the businesses she's funding and investing in provides basically mobile OBGYN services to women so that they can stay on schedule through their pregnancy and afterwards in terms of getting to their appointments on time. And you would think, oh, why weren't they getting to their appointments on time? We've always known this problem, and we always known that the outcomes were not the same across communities. Well, it's not because they were just being, delinquent. It's because they oftentimes couldn't get childcare or couldn't get a ride or had work considerations that were difficult to manage in the ways that, we in our professional community have a much more leeway and ability to manage, right? And so just as a small example of something that, especially, as a man, right? Just even not thinking through things like that and having the perspective to think through things like that further proves the point as to why this strategy is right and why Maria is the right person to get our capital.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, what I love is you're bringing these stories to life. And then Alex, Amali, Rachel, if you have any stories that you'd be happy to share, just raise your hand, because unfortunately there's no hand raise function in there. But, oh, great. Alex, you must have a good story or two.
Sure. I think for me, as I said earlier, it's really important to integrate it into your core business. So my core business is infrastructure investment at Facebook, right? We go and we finance subsea cables and terrestrial fiber investments to bring connectivity to the under or unconnected. And so in my role doing this in emerging markets, it's really critical that we partner with local entrepreneurs. And I'm proud to say that in all of the investments that we did last year in 2020, which was our biggest year ever in terms of investing in some of these markets, all of the partners that we financed were founded by local partners, right? And since we invest in Africa and APAC and LATAM, these were local Black and brown founders for the most part. And I say that because in my prior role as a private equity executive, oftentimes the private equity firms getting capital in Africa are not actually founded by or run by Africans. Oftentimes the PE firms, the portfolio companies that are getting capital in these markets are not in fact founded by locals. And to Omar's point, having the perspective of someone who is a potential customer is critical to being able to identify and solve the problem. So the woman he mentioned who founded that has that perspective of potentially having been a mother, or at least being familiar with issues that women face, right? And so that gives them a perspective that's able to see an opportunity that Omar himself may not have seen. Similarly, in our markets and infrastructure investing, it's important to not just, everything we do is based on partnership, because we don't believe we, Facebook, necessarily know best sitting in Menlo Park, California, what is the actual connectivity barrier or how to solve that connectivity barrier in Nigeria or in the Democratic Republic of the Congo or in South Africa or in Indonesia or in Pakistan, right? It's important to listen to locals and to support those Black and brown founders who are actually going to change the ecosystem and bring connectivity. So proud to say that in all of the investing that we're doing, that's really a critical lens through which we approach this, is ensuring that we're not just supporting Americans who are trying to solve these connectivity problems, but really supporting locals who understand the problems and who have unique solutions that we may not otherwise see, and to bring our capital to support the development and the acceleration and scaling of those local solutions.
Okay, great. So putting your money where your mouth is. I love it. All of you guys are doing that, and it's wonderful to see. Rachel or Amali, if you have any other insights, that would be great. And if not, I'll move to the last question. But yeah, Amali, over to you.
Yeah, I think just actually continuing on from the point before, I think, that there's part of things which are around what Microsoft can do specifically. So for example, I don't make investments from my side of the business, but thinking about the programs that we run. So we actually launched I think it was last October, our nonprofit tech acceleration program for Black and African American communities. And that's one way that we're supporting sort of companies directly. But I think more than that, also just really making use of the expertise in the community as well. So, one of our partners who we've been working with recently in the UK has been 1,000 Black Voices, who run a tech health, a Black tech accelerator. And just thinking about some of the companies who've come through there was one actually who was also now we're having conversations about through our AI for Social Impact program, a company called Techie Health. They offer basically remote telediagnostic devices, really, really amazing products. Another company called Cloud APS, amazing founder called Christy Cole, and they basically offer enterprise cloud computing services and kind of supporting businesses to build out their SaaS applications and stuff as well. So I think there are things that we can do ourselves, but I really passionately also believe in, it's not just about us, right? This isn't about Microsoft kind of doing things and owning things. We should be putting money, resources, support into the hands of people who have expertise as well. And I think that partner play, across, I think, all of the speakers here is such a critical part of that.
Cool. And then Rachel, you had one quick point, because then I'd like to wrap the panel up and bring it to a close. My gosh, we're almost an hour in and there's so much to talk about. I think we could talk about this for days, but the good news is we do have a Clubhouse panel from 7 to 8 p.m. So I'm sure people can jump on and ask questions then. And if you guys are around, tune in. So Rachel, do tell us what you had to say.
Sure. So I was just going to say, we recently have done a lot of these initiatives and we're seeing very early signs that, it's working. Like the goal of this whole thing is to change the ecosystem, change where people look for founders, all of that. And so, earlier this year, we've moved to a new year. Last year, we launched a Black Founders Immersion program, and we identified 12 amazing founders. We had, a ton of applications. So we now know a lot of the Black founders in this ecosystem in Europe and also in the US. And we started to see very early signs. So once we announced that, I had at least 10 to 15 VCs, many of the top VCs interested in seeing what we got. Who do we get? How can they help? How, can they look at our pipeline? All of that. That's real change. When we, now let's hopefully see some investment, obviously. When we announced the $2.1 million Black Founders Fund, same result. Within the next day, I had so many calls from VCs and others that want to explore follow-on funding, have a look at what we invest in, all of that. So, I think the signs are there that the work that we're doing is changing and can really change how things operate. Specifically, in Europe, and I'm assuming also the same is happening in the US in a bigger scale, that I hear from my colleagues over there as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the last couple of minutes, a couple of observations I'd make is every single one of you has put your money where your mouth is as an organization, but actually observe that it's you as individuals. It might not necessarily be your day job, but you've stepped up because this is something that is so close to the heart and so passionate. The other observation I'd make is we've got big bank and big tech. And I'm curious where the rest of the industry is and what they're doing. I don't know if we don't have an answer to that, but I think I encourage all of us and all of us in the audience as well, that we've got to partner with each other and collaborate with each other and send deals to each other and, great founders each other's way. This is not about competition. This is about lifting everybody up together. And I think that's one of the big observations I've had to make from today. I'm a venture partner at a fund here in London, so I would hope to see deal flow from, growth stage European companies that you guys would send my way, because I think that's how we pay it forward to each other. I think with our last minute, I just wanted to say that Gary and the FounderTribes team have launched their Seeders round today as well. And I think if you email Gary at FounderTribes.com, he can send you more information on that. But I think all of us need to jump in and support people like what the Founders Tribe team are trying to do. And with that, I'd love to bring this to an end and thank every single one of you for all that you do, your passion and your focus on everything, and for representing your organizations so beautifully well. So with that, I wish everyone a goodbye and come to the Clubhouse chat at 7 p.m. tonight, because I'm sure a lot of folks here would be able to answer a lot of questions. We just want to chit chat with you, because that's what Clubhouse is about. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Wow. Wow. Wasn't that an amazing panel? Thanks, Bindi. As usual, you're awesome. You did a great job, and all of the panelists. I love the fact that there were so many women on the panel, except for Omar. So, like, that was cool as well. And so now, as Bindi said, we'll catch you guys later on Clubhouse for the post show, along with other folks like Piers Linney, who used to be a dragon on Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, as you guys know it in America, Erica Brodnock, who's going to moderate the next panel, Kenneth Eby, who's also going to be on the next panel, and a few other investors and speakers. So we'd love to see you guys there. Only thing is, you need an iPhone because Clubhouse doesn't work on Android. But if you have an Apple device, please find us on Clubhouse or send a message to Wendy at FounderTribes.com. Likewise, our next event after this panel will be on Thursday at about the same time, when we will ask VCs and angels, are investors really feeling the heat to diversify? Let's see. There was some indication on its last panel that the answer might be yes, but let's hear from them directly. And until then, our techies are in the back putting the finishing touches on the app. But if you'd like to try it out for yourself, please send me an email to Gary, G-A-R-Y, my name, it's on the screen, at FounderTribes, also on the screen, .com. And I'll personally send you a link that will allow you to download the beta version. In case you need a reminder of what FounderTribes does, I'm going to ask Petar to put the video on again. And with that, I'll pass it to Petar.
We live in a world where more than 500 million entrepreneurs will never get access to the feedback, networks, and capital they may need to realize their dreams. Talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity isn't. FounderTribes exists to change that. Our mobile app can be accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. It all begins with a founder submitting a pitch that will be evaluated by a community of entrepreneurs and investors relevant to their vertical and stage. Through the app, each founder gets qualified feedback about which areas of their business might need improvement, in the form of how many people swiped right or left, and in the form of ratings on each key element of a business plan based on Sequoia Capital's evaluation system. Each founder is then offered a personalized selection of video tips from world-class founders who explain how they've overcome similar challenges. Our professors are truly world-class and include such names as Stacey Abrams, Steve Blank, Jen Wong, and Anne Wojcicki. If a founder wants more support, she can access our curated database of coaches and mentors and set up one-to-ones, all via the app. Each founder iterates her pitch until the community of entrepreneurs and investors say that she is investment worthy. We'll then introduce her to relevant funders appropriate to her stage and vertical, including venture capital, angels, and alternative finance. We already have paying customers, including Capital Enterprise. And our investors include American unicorn founders such as Sander Daniels, founder of Thumbtack, which has raised $436 million from Sequoia Capital and Google, Zach Bookman, founder of OpenGov, who has raised $140 million from investors including Andreessen Horowitz, executives like Jamie Broderick, who is the former head of wealth management at UBS UK and Jersey, and Dana Wagner, who is currently the chief legal officer at Impossible Foods, which has raised $1.4 billion from investors like Serena Williams, Katy Perry, and Jay-Z. We are leveling the playing field for entrepreneurial talent. So download the app, accelerate your business, and empower yourself.
Awesome. Well, as the video highlighted, talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity is not. And there are more than 500 million entrepreneurs around the world that are being denied opportunity. But what opportunity means in each context might differ depending on who and where we're talking about, which is why we're so excited to hear from the next panel on building diverse entrepreneurial nations, where the trailblazing serial entrepreneur and soon-to-be PhD, Dr. Erica Brodnock, will oversee this panel and moderate it. And in a lot of ways, this panel is actually really personal to me because we'll hear from international dignitaries from my hometown of New York, my original hometown, i.e. my birthplace of Jamaica, my new hometown of London, and some of my favorite countries in the world, such as Nigeria, Antigua and Barbuda, and India. They will provide us with the best practices as to what people are doing around the world to level the playing field for entrepreneurs in their own cities and countries. But before we get to the panel, I have the honor of introducing Janelle Doris, who is the Commissioner of the New York Department of Small Business Services. Commissioner Doris is charged with running a city agency focused on equity of opportunity that will lead to economic self-sufficiency and mobility for New York City's diverse communities. Commissioner Doris was previously the city's first senior advisor and director of the Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise Unit. Under his leadership, the city has awarded over $14.6 billion to minority and women-owned businesses. Commissioner Doris was also the first Chief Diversity Officer for the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery, where he created the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights and developed the award-winning Local Workforce Opportunities Program. Commissioner Doris holds several degrees and certificates, including a Master of Arts in Public Policy and Analysis, a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Sociology from Stony Brook University, a Master of Divinity from Oral Roberts University, and a Turner Construction Management Certificate. He also serves as the co-chair of the Small Business Subcommittee of the Task Force on Racial Inclusion and Equity. He lives in Queens with his wife, Aisha, and their 2 children. With that, thank you so much, Commissioner Doris, for joining us, and the floor is now yours.
Well, thank you so much, Gary, for having me on, and really excited about this day in particular because it's Black. This is the first day of Black History Month, and so we are very excited to be here speaking with you all. Look, it's an honor to join the Founders Tribe Black History Month Speaker Series and to open a panel of influential leaders who are movers and shakers in the business world. Entrepreneurship is the most, in my view, the most viable and sustainable way to close the racial wealth gap. And I know that personally, as a previous business owner myself and of a small consulting firm, Yet we see stark disparities when we look at the entrepreneurship landscape. Our landmark report, Advancing Black Entrepreneurship in New York City, revealed that Black New Yorkers make up 22% of the population, but only 2% of the business owners. And the Citigroup report revealed that systemic racism against Black Americans has cost the U.S. $16 trillion. And the pandemic, even more so, health crisis that triggered the economic crisis that we're in now has further highlighted the systemic issues that contribute to the inequalities in business ownership and the racial wealth gap. So look, here at Department of Small Business Services for the City of New York, we've seen the disproportionate impact COVID had on communities of color, Black communities in particular. We see with the federal programs and assistance programs, particularly the PPP program, only 12% or so was given to Black companies and minority companies that they asked for. And then really a big one that is really relevant, I think, to the discussion here today around supporting our minority startup businesses. Just 1% of venture capital dollars went to these businesses, and particularly Black women businesses, 0.02%. That's an issue. That's a problem we've got to solve. So despite all these alarming stats, we certainly know that there's a tremendous potential for Black businesses and also for all types of businesses and minority businesses in the city. We see that Black businesses in particular are growing 4 times faster than white businesses in the city. And Black women are the fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs in the United States. So think about that for a second. But there's a disconnect to resources, getting the opportunity to get funded, and also to advance your particular business and meet your full potential. So look, these stats have only increased the urgency of our work at the Small Business Services Department here in the city of New York to address the needs of struggling businesses across the spectrum during this time of the pandemic and the support that we need to give. So look, we launched our BNYC initiative that seeks to just do that, right? To solve these inequalities that we're seeing. The first of its kind, in a major American city, BNYC will help address the racial wealth gap by empowering Black entrepreneurs to launch and sustain their businesses, right? We are providing equitable access to financing, strengthening connections with the entrepreneurial community, scaling these businesses for long-term success, and really to meet the challenges of the economy of tomorrow. But we can't do this alone. Certainly, we have joined with Goldman Sachs, Ernst & Young, MasterCard, and Brooklyn Navy Yard and the Young Men's Initiative to advance this work around our Black entrepreneurs. And BNYC Initiative is an example which we believe is sustained commitment that recognizes the importance of the community to really advance the economic viability of the city broadly and the racial and social equity that is necessary in order for us to support our entrepreneurs and our communities. With that, look, I want to share before I go 3 guiding principles that's really driving us here at SBS, and certainly I think aligns with what you're doing here today and what you've been doing and what you will continue to do as we help move the entrepreneurship let's call it mandate forward in order to come back from this crisis and deepen our work in the community. First is around innovation. COVID-19 has shifted the business landscape in unimaginable ways. And, our entrepreneurs today have a unique opportunity really to reimagine solutions that respond to present day needs and drive our economy in the right direction. The second is adaptability. When New York City became the epicenter of the COVID-19 crisis, entrepreneurs stepped up and they adapted quickly. They pivoted their business models and they were able to not only serve the city successfully, but serve themselves and move their community forward and providing necessary jobs at a time where we had unprecedented job loss. And so adaptability is just so critical in an uncertain and unpredictable times. And then the last really one, I think, which speaks to this discussion today as well, is around collaboration as a key principle of our comeback, right? Collaboration between our government, the private sector, small businesses, and the community is key to building back our city and really our nation and the global economy. We need partners and that understand the value of providing fair and equitable access to resources and lending opportunities to Black entrepreneurs, to minority entrepreneurs, for women entrepreneurs in particular. This will ultimately create a sustainable infrastructure to bridge the racial wealth gap and also the gender gap to help build diverse entrepreneurship across the nation. Our world has changed, folks. However, entrepreneurship remains a vital solution for the nation's economic recovery, for our city's economic recovery. We must work collaboratively together, collectively to ignite the next generation of entrepreneurs, but also get them the resources that they need, to fund them, to give them the technical assistance and support that they need to reach their potential. Because ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, we know with $16 trillion being left on the table if we're not engaging these entrepreneurs in an equitable manner. So I want to encourage you to listen closely to the leaders that are about to speak today so we can learn how we can contribute and build a diverse entrepreneurial cities and nations. Again, thank you for having me today and enjoy the rest of the panel. Thank you.
All right, rookie mistake. Thank you, Petar, for correcting me. As I was saying, thank you, Commissioner Doris, for that amazing talk. I think as we heard today, the two key messages are it's not just about mentoring, it's also about cash. And secondly, that it's not only the right thing to do, it's also the smart and economic thing to do, because we're leaving a lot of money on the table when we disenfranchise and don't empower minorities and women around the world. And so with that, I'd like to now pass you guys over to a really powerful woman, one of my favorite people and also an investor in FounderTribes, Dr. Erica Brodnock.
Hi, thank you, Gary. I'm not quite doctor yet, still a student, still a PhD student. But enjoying the journey, really enjoying the journey. Thank you for such a warm welcome, and it's my pleasure today to host Building Diverse Entrepreneurial Nations. So as Gary said, I'm a PhD candidate at the London School of Economics. I'm also the co-founder of a couple of software companies and Extend Ventures. Extend Ventures is a not-for-profit organisation that exists to diversify access to funding for innovation and entrepreneurship, particularly for overlooked founders. And it's my absolute pleasure to moderate the panel today. I mean, in the wake of Black Lives Matter and the movement that we've seen spurred on over the last year or so because of the unfortunate death of George Floyd, we've had some incredible conversations about what can be done to increase diversity and access to venture capital, particularly to Black founders, who it is currently estimated receive around about 1% of venture capital in the US and more like 0.25% in the UK. To contextualize this, part of my work at Extend Ventures has been undertaking the research to look at exactly how many Black and brown founders in the UK have received money over the last 10 years. And it was quite shocking to see that just 38 Black founders had received venture capital funding in the last 10 years, while over 90% of the 13 billion of funding that's distributed in Europe in 2019 alone went to all white, all male founding teams. And so one set of entrepreneurs are kind of exclusively being given a license to shape the future of innovation. And as the world is forced to reset in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, we're really opportune to share good practice around the globe and to ensure that Black and brown founders aren't being left behind. And this isn't a problem that's unique to one country. So I am privileged today to be joined by an incredible panel. And together we're going to look at what we can do to level the playing field and ensure that we enable Black and brown entrepreneurs to create productive companies and to scale wealth and to create opportunities for their communities. So essentially, we're going to be looking at how we can begin the process of building diverse entrepreneurial nations. So please welcome Kenneth Aby from BNYC, Janet Coyle from London and Partners, Diane Edwards from Jamaica Promotions Corporation, Ifeyinwa Ugochukwu from the Tony Emelu Foundation, Chris Smart from British Patient Capital, Garfield Joseph from the government of Antigua and Barbuda, and AJ Batra from the Wadwani Venture Fast Track Foundation. Thank you all for giving up your time to speak on this panel. I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves, and if you could just take a moment, a brief minute to introduce yourselves so that we can get into the questions. And I'm going to thank you for giving me in advance for being really laser sharp and specific with my questions, because I'd like to see whether we can kind of leave here with some action points that both us and the audience can take away in terms of making sure that we're doing something to contribute to building more diverse entrepreneurial nations going forward. So I'd like to kick off with that 1 minute introduction. And if I start with you, AJ.
Hi, and good evening from New Delhi, India. Thank you so much for having me over. Really privileged. I represent Wadhwani Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organization which is enabling entrepreneurship around the world. In particular, I lead a program that supports startups and incubators in India, Latin America, Africa, and other parts of Southeast Asia. And our mission really is to provide mentoring, connections, and capital to entrepreneurs who bring innovative solutions. So glad to be here once again. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. And we'll move to Garfield now.
Okay, from the beautiful island of Antigua in the Eastern Caribbean. Been in business for the last 25 years in various managerial positions. Last worked in the US for the last 15 years for the Fortune 500 company. Came back to Antigua in 2019 to head the government's Entrepreneurial Development Fund. It's a program that basically extends low-cost finances for locally owned businesses and also provide technical assistance. Separate and apart from doing this on a full-time basis, I also teach at the University of the West Indies, the Five Islands campus. That's a fourth arm of the university that was recently established. I actually teach business and strategy to final year students at that university. So that's Garfield Joseph in a nutshell.
Thank you, Garfield. And we're going to move to Chris. Chris Smart.
Just thought I'd take myself off mute there. Yeah, just check. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you now, thank you.
Good stuff. I'm very happy to be here. So I work for British Patient Capital. So we are a UK-based investor into venture and growth funds. We're a subsidiary of the British Business Bank, which is the UK's development bank. And it has this overarching mission to improve access to finance for SMEs here in the UK. I've worked at the bank for about 5 years now, and prior to that worked at the Royal Bank of Scotland. And very happy to be here on the panel talking about these very important issues.
Thank you, Chris. And can we move to Ifeyinwa?
Hello, everyone. So I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, based in Lagos, Nigeria. And since 2010, when the foundation was incorporated, the primary and only focus has been entrepreneurship, long before it was on the global agenda. In 2015, our founder, Mr. Tony Elumelu, launched a $100 million commitment to identify, train, mentor, and fund 10,000 young African entrepreneurs across all 54 African countries. We are in the 7th year of the program, and we have trained, mentored, and funded just over 9,000 entrepreneurs. It's the largest private sector-led entrepreneurship program on the African continent, and we are completely committed to democratizing opportunity and empowering the youth through entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Ife. And moving to Diane.
Hi, I'm Diane Edwards, and I represent JAMPRO, Jamaica Promotions. We're Jamaica's economic development agency, so we attract investment into Jamaica, and we help small companies to find export markets. So we have projects which directly help tailor-made, customized programs help entrepreneurs get into new export markets. So technology is just one of the areas in which we work, and we have a specific program called the Global Service Sector Program, which is focused on developing technology skills. So I'll talk more about that later. Wanted to say, great to be here. Happy Black History Month for those in the UK, and happy Reggae Month for those in Jamaica.
Thank you, and happy Reggae Month to you too, Diane. Moving to Janet.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks for having me. What an amazing panel. Great to be with you all. And thanks to Gary too for this brilliant event, so timely and so important. So I'm Janet Coyle, Managing Director for Business at London & Partners. So we're essentially London's international trade, promotion and investment agency. So my responsibility is all the business activity at London & Partners, and we support around 1,000 startups and scale-ups through various programs each year. So that includes startups, really high growth companies that we're trying to help with international business. It also includes businesses from around the world who are looking to sort of establish a presence here and scale here. We also co-founded London Tech Week that takes place each September. And we also host Silicon Valley Comes to the UK, which is another tech conference that takes place in November. So innovation, I heard the earlier speaker actually talk about the importance of innovation. And there's never been a more important time to innovate around this topic. So absolutely thrilled to be here, Erica. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining us, Janet. And moving now to last but not least, Kenneth.
How are you, Erica? And hello to everyone on the panel, to everyone who's dialing in. My name is Kenneth Eby. I am the Executive Director of Black Entrepreneurs NYC, or BNYC. We are the first initiative of its kind that is focused specifically on providing support to Black entrepreneurs in New York City within the 5 boroughs who are looking to start businesses and looking to scale businesses. We are an initiative of the New York City Department of Small Business Services, which provides resources to really the heartbeat of New York City, which is our small business community throughout the 5 boroughs of this city. And Black Entrepreneurs, which is really an initiative of SBS, has been focused on a number of key areas of support, including providing equitable access to capital for Black entrepreneurs, connecting Black entrepreneurs with more robust networks, identifying opportunities to scale their businesses, and also positioning Black entrepreneurs and businesses for a firm place in the economy of tomorrow. So the future forward, high growth, high priority industries of our society. I want to say thank you to Gary for this tremendous initiative and for inviting me to be on this esteemed panel today.
Well, thank you all for also keeping all of your introductions to less than 1 minute. That was a fantastic display. So I guess really it's important to look at what's working and keep doing it. But then it's also just as important to acknowledge when actions aren't creating the desired outcomes and to look at what else can be done. Chris, I'm going to come to you to start with here. The British Business Bank's Alone Together report essentially states that Black people are being locked out of entrepreneurship. The Extend Ventures report recommendations include that we create some sort of investing in ethnicity code and a diverse co-investment fund in the UK to kind of start to address some of those systemic issues that Black and brown entrepreneurs are facing. To date, we've seen the US government commit $30 billion. Canada's committed $100 million. Can you take us through, from your perspective, what the UK is going to be doing to kind of follow in the footsteps of its peers?
That's a very important question, Erica. What I would just start off by saying, I guess, is that with your report and the bank's report, that they really provided evidence for issues that I think we knew were around, but we knew it anecdotally, and it really shone a light onto those things. One of the words, I guess, which really struck me in the report that we published was that this report is systemic. Therefore, any solutions that we implement will have to be very, very well thought through and very comprehensive. So with that said, just coming on to what we're doing as a bank right now, what I'll do is I'll split it into what we've been doing so far, what we've recently implemented, and what we are hoping to implement in the future. So the bank has a program called the Startup Loans Program. And as the name suggests, they provide startup capital for entrepreneurs here in the UK that want to start a business. That program has provided 75,000 loans since its inception, with 18% of the loans going to founders of Black, ethnic minorities effectively. Now, that number is obviously a starting point, and there's more that we can do, but it is a starting point. What we've recently implemented, which is a bit nearer to home for me, is that for the VC funds that we interact with, that we're encouraging them rather to think about the level of diversity in their teams, but also in the companies that they invest into. So making sure effectively that when they're discussing deals around the table or on Zoom, that not all the individuals look the same. And that's something which we're monitoring. In terms of what we're hoping to work on going forward, the UK Prime Minister recently set up a commission to focus on some of the underlying causes that the playing field in the UK is not level. If you're a founder from a Black or other ethnic minority background, and we're expecting the outcomes of that report later this month, hopefully. And it's my hope and expectation that there will be things in that report that we can implement to really address these issues.
No, that sounds great. And I guess I'm coming to you next, Kenneth, with a similar sort of question, really. According to the Mayor of New York, 20% of the city is ethnically diverse, yet only 2% of the businesses are Black owned. So what can we do to distribute equity funding for entrepreneurs more equally? And perhaps if there's anything in particular that you're working on at the moment that the UK may be able to share some good practice with on, and everyone else, it would be great to hear about that.
Yes, well, I think that one of the important things in terms of how we're going about doing this work, to piggyback on what Chris said, is that a lot of the disparities and inequities that we're seeing are a result of historical practices, and they are in fact systematic. So you have to take a very serious approach in terms of looking at what the root causes are, and then also identify what the issues are today with a level of precision to be able to address what types of policies we want to put forward. BNYC launched in September of 2019, and so we are very much in the process of rolling out programs to address some of these historic and systematic challenges that have faced Black entrepreneurs in the United States, but obviously our scope is limited to New York City, the 5 boroughs of the city. And so to kind of the level of rigor started with a report that we issued in August of 2020, which helped to identify what Black entrepreneurs who were surveyed, business owners, community stakeholders, identified as key issues of concern and challenge for individuals looking to start businesses. Unsurprisingly, the top issue was access to capital, equitable access to capital. And so when we look at that question, we have to really identify what are some of the barriers that have prevented Black business owners from being able to get access. And we're looking at both the brick and mortar stores, the mom and pop shops that really, as I said, kind of constitute the lifeblood of New York City and our communities. But we're also looking ahead at orienting business opportunities that emerge in these high growth, high priority sectors, including technology, healthcare, clean energy, et cetera. And so we have to have an approach which is looking at the types of capital, the types of funding that tend to support those different directions. And so with respect to the mom and pop stores, the small businesses that we traditionally support, there are challenges with access to capital. And one of the issues is that historically, some of the traditional lenders have not tended to lend to Black businesses over time. And so we are looking at different ways to identify sources of funding and to gather sources of funding at the city level. A host of areas that we're looking at. We're looking at Black-owned banks. Since 2008, the number of Black-owned banks across the country has fallen by 49%. These have traditionally been the institutions that have lended to Black business owners and deployed their resources in a way that is able to support Black business owners and homeowners. So a lot of times when these businesses, these banks are failing, the needs of Black entrepreneurs actually are also not being met. So identifying opportunities for the city to step in and help to find support to help capitalize these Black banks, that is one direction that we have looked at. Again, very early on, and this is a long-term policy direction, but that is one area. With respect to these small businesses as well, we understand that a lot of the businesses have gotten lending from community development financial institutions, which are community-based institutions that will make smaller loans, products that are more targeted and tailored to the needs of these small business owners. So we've been looking at ways through the Department of Small Business Services to partner with these institutions to provide some of these products to small businesses, particularly in the midst of the COVID pandemic that have been struggling.
I have a quick follow-on question here, Kenneth, and it's just that a lot of what you're speaking about seems to be a for us, by us style approach. Is that the case? Am I interpreting that incorrectly, or is this lots of initiatives that are being run and set up by Black people to support Black people? And how important is that in the decision-making process that's kind of gone before this to ensure that that was what was transpiring?
Well, I would say we're looking at a kitchen sink approach, as you might say, because we're really in a situation where Black businesses are really facing an existential crisis in the United States. Some reports have indicated that at the end of 2020, up to 50% of Black-owned businesses had shuttered. And so we're looking at a very serious situation, which means for us, by us is important, but it's also important to lock arms with partners across various spectrums, various industries. We're looking at institutional investors. We're looking at the philanthropic sector. We're looking at the traditional corporate lenders and looking at opportunities where we might be able to match some of the intention and the desire that has been expressed in some of these corporate pledges with the actual individuals who have the need and who could benefit from. And I can say the institutions can benefit as well from making some smart investments in these founders. So to your question, Erica, we're looking at everything. We do think it's important for individuals who have and institutions that have traditionally supported Black business owners to be supported, and figuring out ways that we can continue to keep them alive. But we're also looking for ways to connect the dots. And that is a really big, important piece of what we're doing. And in terms of my philosophy to this work, it is not just what we are proposing, it is how we are proposing. It's not just what work we're doing, it is how we're doing the work. And critical to all of our work, adaptability, innovation, and collaboration, particularly with the private sector and large corporate institutions.
Great, thank you, Kenneth. And from speaking about fantastic allies to questioning a fantastic ally, Janet, my next question is for you. Just last week, I was inspired by a speech from the Deputy Mayor of London, who was acknowledged that there's a similar problem in London to the one that was has kind of prompted all of Kenneth's work in New York. So what's your response to this at London and Partners? Are there any specific programs being created to rectify this? Is there a specific plan for Black and brown entrepreneurs at London and Partners at the moment?
Thanks, Erica. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm really shocked by that number you quoted earlier of 38 Black founders in the last 10 years. I mean, that is really shocking and something that we have to address not just London and Partners, but a broader ecosystem here. And Kenneth, you're absolutely right. We have to join the dots, and this has to be anything that we put in place needs to be holistic, long-term, strategic. We absolutely have to address these imbalances. Now, London and Partners works very closely with City Hall, so I'm going to just mention three things relatively quickly because I'm conscious of time. But one is this sort of access to capital, which is clearly the priority and what you're absolutely right to focus on today. The second is sort of the programs that we're putting around some of the underrepresented entrepreneurs that have been discussed a little bit today. And thirdly is that private sector input as well. I think, again, back to Kenneth, really, I think it's a whole ecosystem here that we need to really get behind any new strategy. What the Mayor has done is very much part of a recovery plan for London, given what we've all been experiencing this past year. He's really sort of put the really addressing inequalities and promoting a fair and more inclusive London at the very heart of his recovery. Now, there's a couple of activities and programs that have taken place over the last few months. I'll mention them briefly. One is something called a Greater London Investment Fund that was set up to actually fund underrepresented entrepreneurs. So that is now a lot more sort of focus on Black founders and not only connecting them to investors, but giving them every month sort of that investor readiness type of training and then putting them literally in front of investors to pitch. Now, a lot of what I'm talking about is for that sort of high growth tech sector rather than the sort of the smaller, some of the businesses that Kenneth was talking about. But in addition to this sort of investment fund, it's about £100 million. So it's not enough to really address the imbalance and inequalities that we're talking about. But it's almost like shifting some of the programs that are in place to make sure that the right founders and underrepresented entrepreneurs are really having that opportunity. So the other one is the Tech Invest program, Erica, that you might be aware of. That's run in partnership with UK Business Angels. And last November, that's a program where entrepreneurs are invited to apply to have one of 10 places to invest to pitch to a room full of investors. So last November, it was purely for Black founders. No one else could even apply. And there was about 60 applications. They whittled it down to 10 because they always have 10 finalists. And there was a room of about 115 investors. I've been trying to find out earlier today if there's anything that we can announce, but hopefully next month I'll come back to you with how many of these founders have actually got investment. And I'm really hoping that it's quite a large percentage of them. We also at London and Partners we are focused on this, but again, from a more strategic point of view, we're really wanting to have impact here. We don't have a fund, but we do run a number of programs, including the Business Growth Program, 3-month accelerator, where we really support about 60 startups each quarter. So about 49% of the 60 companies that we brought in were Black or other minority ethnic backgrounds. Now, the team really tailored the support and really listened to what their needs are. And not surprisingly, a lot of the needs are access to capital. So there's a real program in place to try and support them to access some finance. And they also heard that they wanted to connect with Black founders in the US. So just last month, they connected 30 of the Black founders here in London with 30 Black founders actually in LA. And they were then starting to share not just the challenges, but opportunities of who they can connect each other to. Because a lot of it is also, making the right connections in this world as well, as we know. We're looking to, as Silicon Valley comes to the UK, as I mentioned, is an event that we host each November. But we've always been doing quite a lot specifically around women founders, and we're conscious of the statistics around Black women founders. It's diabolical, isn't it? So we are planning to launch a cohort of it's only small, Eric, about 15 female founders next month, where we'll spend probably about 12 months supporting them to try and raise Series A, with quite a large percentage of those being underrepresented women founders. So there's quite a lot of initiatives like that taking place. There's also the private sector with organisations like Diversity VC, which Erica, check, but they've formed a partnership where they're trying to address the bias and inequalities actually within the investor ecosystem. As we know, there's a lot of bias there. Cornerstone is another VC that's purely investing in Black founders. Saul Klein at Local Globe VC in London, one of our biggest investors, absolutely mission driven. And what they've done recently is created something called the Newton program, which is actually training up with an education program underrepresented individuals to become investors. So that's where we need to look at this holistically right across the piece if we're going to address these biases.
No, fantastic. Thank you for that overview there, Janet. And I am coming now to you, Diane. I know firsthand how entrepreneurial Jamaicans are and can be. My father's Jamaican. He's an entrepreneur. His father built businesses before him as well. So, and I'm an entrepreneur too. So, there's definitely something in the water in good old Jamdown that gives us an entrepreneurial spirit. So, I know that we're not unique. So could you please give us some indication about the key steps that you're taking and that are needed to enable the next generation of entrepreneurs in Jamaica, particularly those who haven't been able to afford a more traditional education? Because one of the things that we haven't touched upon so far in this panel is the fact that actually entrepreneurship can sometimes be reserved, particularly when funding is being invested, to those who have a university education or a background that is elite and that affords them access to elite networks. So what are you guys doing to try and sort of get around that?
Great framing, Erica, actually. Thanks a lot for that. We are actually doing quite a lot in this space. We're building up a venture capital network, an angel investor network under our Development Bank of Jamaica. And that's really starting to have an impact. We don't have issues of diversity here because we're a majority Black country. So it's not about diversity for us. It's really just about helping entrepreneurs. Within JAMPRO, what we're doing is implementing a global services sector program to upskill a raft of entrepreneurs and people in technology business. So we're finding, so again, this is not for university graduates. This is just for anybody who has an aptitude for tech skills and is interested in getting involved in technology. So you can come at it from university or from high school level, or from not even having finished high school. It's if you pass the aptitude test and you get into it. One company here called Amber Group just launched an academy with the National Training Agency, which we call HEART, Human Employment and Resource Training. And what that does is exactly that. It's a coding academy and helping people who are from the inner city or from wherever to get access to this kind of education. I think there are really three critical things that we're working on. Venture capital is one, and there are a number of programs like voucher assistance programs that also MSMEs can access, and that gives them opportunity to use a voucher to buy marketing, to buy financial and accounting skills, to buy any kind of skills they need and any kind of consultancy they need, and that is critical. We have also another project called Biggie, which is a 50 million IDP funded project, and that's looking at how do we improve the ecosystem for entrepreneurs? How do we give them access to incubators and accelerators? How do we help them scale their businesses and reduce the dropout rate, which is quite high? So one of the successes out of that program is a sorrel harvesting machine. Sorrel is a drink that comes from hibiscus. I'm sure Erica knows what it is. But it's normally hand harvested, and what this entrepreneurial couple has done, and one of the ladies from the UK, the guy is Jamaican, and they've just through really trial and error come up with a little machine that actually does this. It's the handwork out of it. So we were able to help them, link them with pitch opportunities to capital, to investors, and they're now starting to commercialize that. So that's the kind of thing we're doing through the system. And the third point, Bill, what Janet touched on, which is education. So the whole question of digital skills, we have under our program developed a digital skills curriculum, which we are rolling out across secondary schools. And I think it's really critical that we start to train young minds to get into the whole entrepreneurial space and stop thinking of the next job, but to think of the next business they need to create. So it's really operating on the different levels. That's what we're trying to do. We have a whole cohort called Export Max, and that's the SMEs that we are taking literally from startup and from concept through to export market. And so it's a 3-year program of tailor-made assistance to them. So I can go on, but I know time is going, so I'll stop there for the moment. But this space is getting really exciting. One other thing I would mention is we've now created an entrepreneurship accelerator for creatives, because creatives are often left out of this whole entrepreneurship because they don't think of what they're doing as a business. And so we're trying to get our creatives, and Jamaica is a hub of creativity. So trying to get them into a business space, not easy mixing left and right brain. It's a fascinating opportunity. A lot going on in this.
No, it sounds fantastic. And just a quick request or something to add from me, because of the fact that Jamaica is so resource rich and we don't necessarily realize it, because sugarcane, the waste of sugarcane, the molasses, can actually protect the environment by making biodegradable plastic. And I'm not sure that anyone in Jamaica is capitalizing on that opportunity at this point. But that waste and there seems to be, from my perspective, a whole entrepreneurial community that could be created around that waste, and that would lead to export opportunities and what have you. So I genuinely believe that entrepreneurship is going to be the way forward in terms of creating wealth for each of the nations that we have on the call today. And I guess it's about, yes, thinking about technology, but as Ken Kenneth rightly said before, that, you know, it's not just about tech, it's about looking at all of the opportunities that are before us. Coming to you now, Ife, and I hope you don't mind if I call you Ife. I'm guessing that you're Igbo. My mum's from Calabar South, so my dad's Jamaican, my mum's from Calabar South, so I'm a mix, and I've put the two of you right next to each other for exactly that reason. So I'm impressed with the work that you're doing at the Tony Elumelu Foundation. I guess one of the things that I suppose a slight concern that I have is that there are so many entrepreneurial Nigerians, and not just Nigerians, but right the way across the continent. And so how do we not stop at 10,000? How do we create this opportunity for more and more entrepreneurs? You know, there's 1.4 billion people across the continent. What does the future of work look like now? Because it's not going to be the same post-COVID. And as we advance further and further towards automation and globalization. So what will it take for us as a people to emerge as our own nation with our own entrepreneurial ecosystems? How do we harness that?
Thank you so much, Erica. That's a great question. And, you know, when we think of the fact that most, if not all, developed economies, including China, were built on the back of entrepreneurs. And so Africa cannot be different. All over the world, the small and medium enterprises provide 70 to 90% in some cases of the jobs needed in the countries. And so we need to understand in Africa that prioritizing the small and medium enterprises and catalyzing economic development through entrepreneurship is the only way to get the continent to where we need it to be. And that is why our founder, Mr. Tony Elumelu, prioritized entrepreneurship as far as the activities of the foundation is concerned. And so, like I stated earlier, we launched the entrepreneurship program because he knew that the principle of Afri-capitalism, which he developed, states that only the private sector, of course, working hand in hand with development partners and foreign governments, are going to be the ones to develop Africa, to alleviate poverty, and to get the continent to harness its vast human resources as well as natural resources. And so at the foundation, we have leveraged all the elements that have been mentioned by my fellow panelists today, from training, capacity building, to mentoring, and of course, funding, because we firmly believe that training and funding are two sides of the same coin. You know, if you teach an entrepreneur how to start their business, how to grow their business, you can't say, well, hey, good luck, you know, I wish you well. You know, back it up with some funding in their hand so that they can prove their concept and start their entrepreneurial journey. And that is what we do at the Tony Elumelu Foundation, because we know that Africa, sadly, is a continent where there are not that many people who have friends and family that they can get that $5,000 they need to start their business. Because oftentimes for startups, it's that barest minimum. That's what they need to start the business. Most banks, VCs, are not interested in paying at that level. And why should they be? It's not profitable. And so we found that there weren't that many institutions playing at the bottom of the pyramid, you know, which is where you have bright, talented young individuals who have an idea, but they need that boost to turn that idea into reality. And that is why we focus at the bottom of the pyramid, because we want to push entrepreneurs up the pyramid to the point where they're now attractive to the banks and to the VCs and to the angel investors. And that is the model that we've used. And that model, we found that that development organizations are rethinking the way they engage in Africa. They are beginning to realize that it's no longer the era of aid, it's now the era of empowerment. Let's not give a man fish, let's teach him how to fish. And so you have organizations like the ICRC, who are known world over for emergency relief, approaching us saying that, listen, what we found is in these conflict-ridden areas, that without entrepreneurship, without accelerating economic development, the healing never comes. Those communities never get back on their feet. And so they partnered with us because they identified in our model, a tried and tested model that empowers entrepreneurs through training, mentoring, and funding. And we've worked with them in the post-conflict regions of Nigeria, like the Niger Delta and the Northeast, to bring entrepreneurship development so that people can engage in job creation, revenue generating, because guess what? When you're creating jobs, you do not have time to take up knives to kill each other. And that's just the truth. And that is the model that we are applying all over Africa, working with partners like the Africa Development Bank, United Nations Development Program, as well as the European Union. Just in December, we signed a partnership with the European Union, a 20 million euro partnership to fund 2,500 additional women across Africa, across all 54 African countries. So just to note that the foundation's commitment of $100 million meant that we would be selecting 1,000 every year. And we once we're done with the training and the mentoring, we then go on to fund them with a $5,000 non-returnable seed capital. Now, last year, for instance, we had 232,000 applicants to the program. That's 1,000 is just scratching the surface. And so to answer your question of how can we scale, how can we make sure that the 1.4 billion people on the continent have access to these opportunities? It's through partnerships, it's through collaboration, it's by believing in entrepreneurs and putting funding in their hands. Let's not focus so much on the middleman and the consultants who just, talk. We need to walk the walk as opposed to talking the talk. We need to put funds in the hands of the entrepreneurs and give them that opportunity and that ability to prove their concept, translate their ideas into reality, and transform the African continent.
Fantastic, thank you. And I guess, for the Londoners on the line, when we're looking at knife crime and some of the issues that we're facing in inner city London, what we're hearing here is that one of the answers to that could be creating entrepreneurship for young people to get involved in, because as Ife rightly said, when people are busy creating jobs, they don't have the time to pick up a knife and go and stab each other. And so that's super important. And again, I think that one of the stats that I heard on a call recently was that when Andala went to Nigeria to go and start up their operations, they had applications, and 60% of the applications came from the top 1% of people with IQ levels in the world. And so there's this whole notion of needing to teach Africans and Black entrepreneurs and all the rest of it, when actually we do have a super resource rich set of people that just need to be given opportunities. So Garfield, moving to you, and we are going to have to speed up because I'm being told that we need to be off by 10 past. So Antigua comprises a slew of resilient people with big dreams. How do we support Antiguans with the resources they need to turn those dreams into reality as COVID impacts tourism? I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on how Antiguans can begin building the resorts and the infrastructure for themselves, rather than contracts being issued to external developers. So I'm keen to hear from you on that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that question. The Entrepreneurial Development Fund in Antigua was an initiative by the government, having recognized that we have not really created an entrepreneurial class of people as Antiguans and Barbudans. Tourism being the main industry, it is capital intensive, and we have a lot of investments coming from the outside. And we also have a migrant community made up of Chinese. Obviously, they tend to be entrepreneurial. You have the Middle Eastern immigrants who came a long time ago. And so the key question is, how do we create opportunities for local Antiguans and Barbudans? And that's why the fund came into being. And the idea is to not only to provide access to funding and also to provide technical training, but how do we create an entrepreneurial class? Because culturally, historically, we are not seen as an entrepreneurial class of people. And so there are a couple of things that we have started doing. We have placed a lot of emphasis on training not only for existing businesses, but we have this idea of from the classroom to the boardroom. So we can introduce entrepreneurship in the schools to the young folk so that they can have a sense of what entrepreneurship is all about. The other thing I think is important as it speaks directly to the question that you asked, right? So the government has, come up with some initiatives. For example, we recently had an investment forum as a result of COVID and the impact that we have seen on the fallout from tourism, where the government has allocated lands, right, so that locals can invest in those properties specifically. The other thing that the government has done, where we have earmarked properties for international investment in hotels and resorts, within that same space, we have allocated a certain amount of land for Antiguans and Barbudans to invest so that even though they may not have the know, well, not the know it all, but they may not have the technical knowledge to be able to operate a hotel. So they can still invest into that entity and the operator will manage that for locals, which I think is a good idea. The second thing I would say is that we also need to be able to bring persons together. We're a relatively small economy, but we do have some savings. There's no personal income tax in Antigua. And when you look at the domestic savings, we can leverage those limited resources to get to scale. And so one of the initiatives I have, and I've spoken about it locally, and I will try to drive this initiative. For example, if we were to bring in the first instance, for argument's sake, 500 Antiguans with $50,000, that's $25 million, right? But the real capital spent for that is more in the tune of $100 million. Why? Because the government normally gives incentives to international investors by way of duty-free waivers and taxes. So if we're able, and I strongly believe, and I'm really bullish about this idea, that we can demonstrate not only to this generation, but for generations to come, that even with our limited resources, we can leverage economies of scale by bringing our own seed money together and invest in the same type of industries that the international, multinational corporations would like to invest in. So I think the opportunities are endless. It's just a matter of creativity and how we can, bring our limited resources together. And I see a bright way forward.
Sounds fantastic. The crowdfunding model, it has been proven out time and time again, and I don't see why it shouldn't be applied there. So moving finally to AJ, how do you plan to identify and cultivate and then to nurture unicorns in India? What will you be doing to ensure that Indian entrepreneurs beyond Bangalore and other tier 1 cities, as well as female entrepreneurs, are able to access the resources that they need to productively kind of scale their companies?
Thank you, Erica. Great questions. There's a lot that can be said, but I'll try to be succinct. Entrepreneurship is fairly well entrenched in India. I'm sure most people would know that India today is the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. Having said that, we are 1.3 billion people. And for that size, the quality and quantity, if you will, of ventures is fairly short. And we recognize there's a lot that needs to be done, both from a policy angle, monetary, capital, and a bit of social and cultural preparation as well. In fact, as a foundation, one of our mainstay programs for the last 20 years has been to build entrepreneurial skills amongst the youth, school and college going. And that continues to be our focus area, in addition to, of course, working with more mature startups. It's also interesting, today, the country presented its budget for the next year. Our financial year starts April 1st. And like most countries, of course, we've taken a hit on COVID, both economically and, of course, in lives and personal impact. But a couple of things stood out, and I think they're relevant to our conversation. One, as a nation, we are saying we need to focus a lot more on harnessing local innovation, right? Whether it is, interestingly, before COVID hit, India didn't make a single protective equipment, the gear that we put on, right? We imported all of them. So now, of course, things have turned. We are exporting equipment. We also exporting. We also developed vaccine for COVID and exporting that to about a dozen odd countries. So a lot of focus on innovation that makes sense. Health, agriculture, environment, all those are focus areas for us, which is great. The second message from our finance minister / prime minister, and of course the industry voice is we need to double down on creating more jobs. We need to create job creators rather than job seekers. And within that, I think over the last few years, three areas we've been talking about. Some action, but I think more needs to be done. One that you mentioned, Erica, there's a conscious effort to bring more women entrepreneurs into the fold. Uh, so not just addressing the let's say access issues around capital or mentoring, but even the social taboo issues. Fighting those battles, if you will, through awareness and other programs. That's one. Two, we also realize a lot of innovation, as you rightly said, doesn't have to come from New Delhi's and Mumbai's and Bangalore's. There's a lot of local needs that can be met through local innovation and micro innovations. So getting rural entrepreneurs, encouraging them and creating a system of support around them is also supremely critical. And just last week, a new fund has been announced. Not much to begin with, about $150 million for doing seed grants for young entrepreneurs, both in cities and in rural India. So there's a lot that's happening on the ground. I think the biggest realization is, and COVID unfortunately has been a rude shock and reminder to all of us that while we need to be together to build an interdependent world, we also need to make sure there's enough leverage of local talent, local innovation, and I think entrepreneurship is the way forward. Everybody's realizing. So really, the focus on entrepreneurship, if anything, over the last year or so, for a country like India, has increased, but a lot more needs to be done. Of course, I'll stop here. Thank you.
No, well, thank you. And I have to say, there were some gems dropped at the very last minute there from you, AJ, and I am very grateful to all of my esteemed panel today for your thoughts, for your for being candid with your sharing. I would have liked to have gone round to sort of get from everybody one thing that we're going to take away and implement that came from somebody else, just to ensure that there was mixing up. But I'm going to have to ask you to promise me that you will have taken something that someone else said and try it in your own backyard, because we don't have the time to do that. I didn't want to cut anybody off because you were sharing such insights. So thank you once again to each and every one of you for sharing. I'm going to be closing out the event today. So, I mean, Garfield touched on crowdfunding. Gary is crowdfunding for FounderTribes. I'm one of the investors in the company, so I am slightly biased, but I'd love for each and every one of you on the line today to join me as an investor in the company. I think that everyone on my panel today has spoken about the power of education, and being able to see someone like you that's done it before you is equally as important. So I'm backing FounderTribes because of that. And I guess all that remains to be said is thank you to everyone for coming along today, for listening patiently, and we are looking forward to seeing you on Clubhouse. I'm going over to Clubhouse now. Hopefully all of you guys on the panel have got the Clubhouse app and will be able to join us for a chat. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Erica.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Erica.
We live in a world where more than 500 million entrepreneurs will never get access to the feedback, networks, and capital they may need to realize their dreams. Talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity isn't. FounderTribes exists to change that. Our mobile app can be accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. It all begins with a founder submitting a pitch that will be evaluated by a community of entrepreneurs and investors, relevant to their vertical and stage. Through the app, each founder gets qualified feedback about which areas of their business might need improvement, in the form of how many people swiped right or left, and in the form of ratings on each key element of a business plan based on Sequoia Capital's evaluation system. Each founder is then offered a personalized selection of video tips from world-class founders who explain how they've overcome similar challenges. Our professors are truly world-class and include such names as Stacey Abrams, Steve Blank, Jen Wong, and Anne Wojcicki. If a founder wants more support, she can access our curated database of coaches and mentors and set up one-to-ones, all via the app. Each founder iterates her pitch until the community of entrepreneurs and investors say that she is investment worthy. We'll then introduce her to relevant funders appropriate to her stage and vertical, including venture capital, angels, and alternative finance. We already have paying customers, including Capital Enterprise. And our investors include American unicorn founders such as Sandra Daniels, founder of Thumbtack, which has raised $436 million from Sequoia Capital and Google, Zach Bookman, founder of OpenGov, who has raised $140 million from investors including Andreessen Horowitz, executives like Jamie Broderick, who is the former head of wealth management at UBS UK and Jersey, and Dana Wagner, who is currently the chief legal officer at Impossible Foods, which has raised $1.4 billion from investors like Serena Williams, Katy Perry, and Jay-Z. We are leveling the playing field for entrepreneurial talent. So download the app, accelerate your business, and empower yourself.